Happy New Year! Today I'm going to share with you my painting setup for 2020. The materials include the paint and the colors that I use, the paper I paint on, and the brushes that I use. I will also share with you my setup, the equipment I use, and how I lay everything out. I will even break down the cost for you so you can get an idea of how much is my painting setup. Hey, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. I hope you had a wonderful holiday. Mine was good, but it was draining. As an introvert, I definitely need to get back to my studio and have some alone time and create. So for this first video this year, I thought we start off by talking about my material and setup. And as a bonus at the end, I will be sharing with you 3 of my New Year resolution for 2020. So I hope you watch till the end. Having good materials and proper setup is important for painting. Even if you don't consider yourself a professional artist, you still want to create a space that will make your painting experience enjoyable. Before we start, there is one very important thing that I want to talk to you about, and that is to have a dedicated space for painting. It doesn't have to be a fancy or big studio. It can be part of your living room, a study room, or like me, a corner of a garage. The important thing is to have a space that's ready to go whenever you want to paint. If you need to spend 10 minutes to set up for paint, you are killing your motivation right there. One of the hardest things about painting is simply to start, so don't give yourself a hard time to just get started. Okay, now let's check out my painting setup. So this is my studio. This is where I'm doing my paintings. There's nothing fancy, it is actually just a corner of a garage. And as I said before, you don't need a big and fancy space to have a place to paint, but you do want a dedicated space. So when I am painting, when I want to paint, I can come to this area and my paint, my palette, my brush, my light, my paper, they are all ready to go. So all I need to do is fill up the water in a water bucket and I am good to go. So it is very, very important. If you need to spend 10-15 minutes just to set up, you are killing your motivation. So let me break it down and I will just go over my equipments and my materials one by one. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to show you is the base of my painting station. Obviously, this is the desk, but this is an old French easel that I have. I used to paint in oil, so I had a French easel. Now, the benefit of using this as a base is as a drawer, so I can basically use this and store all of my materials here. So we got some paint, some extra brushes and stuff. Now, I used to use this for painting, but I don't anymore. I have another easel on top of these. This is just doesn't have enough space to it. Here I place my palette and my brushes, my water bucket. This itself is a pochette box. Now this pochette box, I can take it out and I can use it when I'm doing plein air. But this is definitely not necessary if you're just painting in a studio, so you can just lay your palette and your brush on the side here. Okay, so this thing is Soho Urban Artist Drawing Board. So I got this on Amazon. I turn it around so you can see the back of it, so you can see how it works. So I usually paint about this. So this is, I didn't really measure it, but I will say about 35 to 40 degrees. And you can make it all the way up like this. This is almost completely straight up. So this is very nice and useful. So I searched around for quite a bit of time. The reason I use this one is it has probably the biggest surface for me to paint on. So let me turn around so you can see a lot better. So the reason I choose this one over all the other drawing boards is because this is huge, this is large. This can hold 18 by 24, which is the largest block you can find. So this is a 20 by 14 paper. So as you can see, this surface holds up the paper very, very well. And it tilts in a very nice degree that I like to work on. So I raise it up a little bit so I can paint standing up. I like to paint standing. I don't really like to sit down. But if you like paint sitting down, you can just put it on the table and it should be at the right height. Make sure you get a chair that fits your need. Okay, so this easel cost about 46 and 19 cents by the time I'm recording this. So it's pretty decent price for what you get. It's a very nice solid surface to work on. And you can see this is quite thick. So I highly recommend it if you don't have an easel yet, and if you're struggling trying to find a way to paint a little bit tilted like me and you need a nice big surface. You don't need a big and expensive drafting table, which if you happen to have, that's great, but if you don't, you can definitely use this. Okay, so on top of the easel, I still have an old drawing board. So the reason I have the old drawing board is because I can still have a little bit more space here. So if I am painting a larger paper and I need to paint in portrait ratio, I will have it covered. But it's definitely not necessary, especially if you're using block, because block is pretty solid on the back. It has a cardboard on the back, very thick cardboard actually, so you actually don't need this. I just like having this around. Here's my setup when I'm putting the paper on. I have a cutout cardboard here. The reason I do that is because when I'm doing my washes and at the end of the wash, I can still just paint right over it instead of if I put the paper down like these, then I am struggling with this. Okay, because the pencil holding block is wider, is bigger than the paper itself. So that's why I put a cardboard there. So this way I can drag my brush across and it can paint very, very easily. So just a little modification that I make. Now in terms of the lighting, I did a video before. This is 5 LED lighting. It's a very good lighting. And this light costs about $65, actually $64.99 by the time I'm recording this video. So I'm not going to go into detail with the lighting because I had a separate video on that. I will link down below and I will put a card on the side. But basically what it is it has a nice very flood light and it has a diffuser here. It's really bright. It has a diffuser here, so it's not going to cast any very harsh shadows, so it's very pleasant to work with. It is bright enough, and most importantly, the lighting temperature can be adjusted, so I can select 6000 Kelvin, which is a very natural daylight color, so you can use that and have a very accurate color. Now I got some feedback from my video about this lighting that some people said that you should be painting with light bulb that's CRI over 90 or even 100 so you can get better representation of the color. I understand where they're coming from, but personally I don't think it's really that necessary, and the reason being that most of the painting are not going to show under these kind of lighting, even in like art show and stuff. It is important if you're textile artist, if you're choosing like designer, you really need that accuracy and you really need that red and some saturated color to pop. But for us, we're just painting watercolor. This is, for me, is not really necessary because at the end of the day, when your painting is hanging on the wall in somebody's home, they're not going to use that light bulb everywhere. So just my opinion right here. Okay, now let's talk about the pencil that I'm using. This is a mechanical pencil. I got it from Japan. I really like it, but you definitely don't need the same pencil as I do. The very important thing is this pencil takes 4B lead. So the 4B lead I have, they are 0.5 millimeter. So make sure you get a pencil, a mechanical pencil that is 0.5 millimeter. So the reason I use mechanical pencil is that it will never get dull. You can always draw very nice fine line with it. So this is a very, very important thing to have. And this is the lead that I'm using. So as you can see, it is 0.54B. And the reason I use 4B is that it can go dark enough, but also the lead is soft enough so it's not going to dent the paper. If you are using let's say HB, is actually very, very hard, and it's actually pretty hard to see when you are doing the wash on top because this is not dark enough. So make sure your mechanical pencil can take 0.5 millimeter and use 4B lead. So I'm not able to find an exact one on Amazon, but I do have another one that's pretty decent as well, and that costs about $4. The mechanical pencil lead costs about $4, so they're very, very cheap. And for the eraser, I just use a regular kneaded eraser, and the reason I use kneaded eraser is that it works pretty well, but it's also very soft and it's not gonna get dusty and all over the place. And then it's not going to damage the paper because it is nice and soft. Okay, so let's talk about brushes. These 7 brushes are the brushes that I use the most. So I'm going to go over them with you. Now, I understand there are a lot of brushes out there, and I haven't really tried that many brushes, but these are the brushes that I like to use the most. They work pretty well with me, and I'm the type of artist that I stick with what I like. So let me go over them with you from large to small, and I'll also show you the mark that they make. Let's start the biggest one. This is number 18, Escoda Aquareo. This is Joseph Spookwich signature brush. This is a squirrel hair brush. So it's a natural hair brush. I use this brush mainly for big washes. This one along with this number 14 squirrel hair brush. These 2 brushes is what I call wash brush. I use them quite often, especially for the first wash because they soak up a lot of water, so it's suitable for big wash. And if you can see, the tip is actually quite sharp for the size of that brush. So it's very easy to paint around the highlights, to leave some details and things like that. So here's a mark. You can see that it is a very watery brush, and you can also see the point conversion is very, very nice. So because this is a natural hair brush, the hair tend to bend, so it doesn't really stay in shape. This is great for free shape and large shape. It is not as good to paint rigid shape. So the smaller brush, just make a smaller mark, but it's very similar. It's still good for big washes. So this 2 brushes is sold as a set, the Joseph Spookwich signature brush set. By the time I'm recording this video, this set costs $100.48, so it is quite expensive. Escoda by all means is not a cheap brand. However, because they are natural hair brush, they usually last pretty long. I use this 2 brush for about almost 6 months now, and they still hold up pretty well. So you rarely need to change them, depends on how often you paint. Now, Escoda also have a synthetic squirrel hair brush called Escoda Ultimo. It's a lot cheaper, but I haven't tried them yet. I actually ordered them, so I might do a separate video for them. Now coming down in size, let's talk about this 2 synthetic brush. It is also by Escoda. It's called Escoda Perla. Again, it is the Joseph Spookwich signature set. This is also sold as another set. The whole set costs a little bit more than $35, but you can actually buy this 2 synthetic brush that I have separately because the set actually comes with a travel brush that I rarely use, so I start to buy them separately. So by the time I record this video, Escoda Perla number 12 brush is $15.89. And the number 8 one is $12.62. Synthetic hair is a lot more rigid, so it will bend back if you try to paint on it. So they are really good to paint more rigid shapes such as cars, buildings, and some little details and things like that. The synthetic brush, they are not as durable as natural hair brush, so they do tend to go out a lot sooner, especially if you paint with the brush tip a lot. Now over here, I have 2 Kolinsky brushes. I start to use them more and more. This one is number 10, Escoda Reserva. It is a very nice brush. I use that quite a bit. This brush is a little bit old though. I probably need to replace it pretty soon. So you can see the tip of the brush is no longer really sharp. But I never really used that for a very sharp detail. So after getting some water, you can see the brush itself is a little bit softer than the synthetic brush, but it's also not as soft as a squirrel hair brush. So it does have some resilience, but it's great for painting some random organic shape like foliage, trees, bush, grass, things like that. So as you can see, I use that for painting trees and stuff pretty often. Now, one size down, we have a number 6 Da Vinci Mastral. Now, I don't know why I use a different brand for the number 6 Kolinsky brush, but I remember using them and I really like them. This number 6 brush is small enough for me to do some detail work, and like I said before, I like to stick with what works for me, so I never really bother to change it. But as you can see, the tip of the brush is very sharp, so this allows me to do some very nice, delicate, beautiful details. So I often use this brush for trees and foliage as well, but I use that for smaller trees and small branches. The hair is also very resilient, so I actually use that quite a bit for portrait, especially for details like eyes, eyelashes, and things like that. So by the time I record this video, the Escoda Reserva number 10 is $35.65. And the number 6 Da Vinci brush is $34.16. More expensive than the synthetic brush, but they are very good. Now here we have a rigger brush. This is number 1 Princeton Neptune. Sorry that the sticker has covered up the name. But this is a rigger brush. I actually don't use it that much. But this is very useful for some very small thin detail, especially for lines. So I use that for things like cables, electric wires, and small branches and things like that. They are very easy to produce very thin and small marks, but they don't hold a lot of water, so you really need to make sure you load up enough paint in the brush, and you might need to reload the brush halfway through. This rigger brush is $5.38. I don't really use it that much, so it will last for a long time. So this is the brush that I use, all 7 of them. If you already have brushes that you really like, by all means keep using them. These are just the brush that I use. And let's talk about palette. This is an aluminum palette I got from Japan. This is by Holbein. As you can see, it's made in Japan. I got this when I was visiting Japan, so it is a lot cheaper when you get this from Japan. But you definitely don't need this exact same one. Just get a aluminum palette, and as long as there's a decent size mixing area and the color wheel is big enough for your biggest brush, you should be good to go. Now let's talk about the colors that I use. I laid them out from cool to warm. This is just so that it's very easy for me to access the color that I need. So starting from neutral tint, and it is pretty much a black color. It's similar to Penn's gray, but a little bit cleaner. And here we have ultramarine blue, a cool blue color, a cobalt blue, a neutral blue color. And down here I have cerulean blue. I start to use this more and more. It is a warm blue, quite beautiful, a little bit granular, but I actually really like it. Here I have cobalt turquoise. It's one of my favorite color to mix green. This is the only color that is pretty close to green that I have. I can use as a base and just add any of the warm color and it will give me a different variety of green. I pretty much mix all of my greens with cobalt turquoise as base, so it is quite useful. And to the next one we have burnt umber. It's a dark brown color, burnt sienna, a reddish brown color, yellow ochre, sort of a dirt yellow color, and this is Hansa Yellow Deep. It is a warm yellow color. It's not as neutral as cadmium yellow medium, but I like this yellow quite a lot because it's a lot warmer. It's easier to mix a warmer color with this yellow. And here we have cadmium orange hue. Daniel Smith doesn't really make pure cadmium color anymore because it is pretty toxic. And then we have cadmium red medium. This is carmine. It's a really beautiful wine looking color. I like it a lot, but it's pretty strong, so I use them very sparingly. And then we have alizarin crimson. This is a little bit darker, pretty similar to carmine, but a little bit darker and a little bit cooler. And down here I got some dirty colors. I actually rarely wash my palette because a lot of the leftover colors I can just add a little bit of water and pick them up and mix them as neutral gray. So my palette always looks a little bit dirty. So these are the colors that I use. I actually don't have that many colors in my palette. When you're just getting started, don't use too many colors. I will have another video talking about color mixing. But in general, you want to start with a few colors and then expand your palette. And these colors are not fresh out of the tubes. They are mostly dried out, but I still use them, and I actually prefer them this way because after they are dry, you can just add a little bit of water and they will be revived and you can use them again. I actually prefer to work this way because straight out of the tube paint is usually very strong and I tend to go a little bit more heavy-handed. So if I use straight out of the tube paint, oftentimes I can make it too strong. So aside from these colors, I also have a white gouache, and the way I use it is I open it up and I just use my brush and dig into the paint tube and just get some straight out of the tube white gouache to paint. So I usually use white gouache to get some of the highlight back and paint a little bit of the white detail, and that's about it. So I don't really use it that much, and I try to avoid using it as much as possible now because I want to keep my watercolor a little bit cleaner. But just to get a little bit highlight back, white gouache is pretty useful. Okay, so for the paper, I almost always use watercolor block, and the reason is that I don't need to tape down to the board and it is glued on the side, so it's always flat. Even if it buckles a little bit, if you wait for it to dry and wait for a day or two, it will flatten itself back. And when you done using it, all you need to do is to use a palette knife and take the paper out. So just by using palette knife, I can take the sheet out. Very nice and clean. So my first choice is Saunders Waterford. I use high white rough. So even in rough, it's actually still pretty smooth when you're painting on it. It just have some texture, so it's very nice to use. And their high white is actually pretty white. It's less of a cream color. So I really like it. One thing about Saunders is that it absorbs a little bit faster, so it will tend to dry a little bit faster. So I paint mostly in 16 by 12. So I paint either in 16 by 12 or 20 by 14 paper, but I usually don't go over this size unless it's like special commission or something. So in the beginning, I would suggest you use a little bit smaller paper. It's a little bit more manageable. You can even use a paper that's smaller than this, maybe 11 by 14. I think that would be fine. Okay, so Saunders paper is quite expensive here in the US because it's probably import paper. So this 16 by 12, 20 sheet watercolor block, it costs about $42 right now. So it is a little bit pricey, but it's really good quality paper. Another paper I do use is Arches. Now Arches also have pretty good papers, but one of the things about Arches is that it's a lot rougher. So in this case, I use cold press rather than rough because their rough is actually very, very rough. Okay, it almost reminds me of sandpaper. The cold press compared to Arches rough, it still feels quite rough. So when you do painting on it, your brush will feel a lot more resistance. Arches paper though, they dry a little bit slower, so you have a little bit more time to work. Another thing about Arches is that when you wet the paper, it will emit this weird smell that I don't really like. I don't find it pleasant, so I use it less and less now. Personally, I recommend Saunders over Arches, but they are both really good paper. Arches paper dry a little bit slower, so it might be a little bit easier to work with. This one costs about $43 as well, so it's actually pretty expensive as well. And I also use this paper. This paper is Bao Hong. I got it from AliExpress. The size is a little bit different because the Asian size is different from the European, the Western size. But this is a very, very good paper. Don't be fooled by saying academic watercolor paper. This is actually very good paper. I would say it is just as good, if not better, than Arches paper. So I also use cold press for Bao Hong because this is pretty similar to Arches, but it doesn't really smell and it's very nice and bright and white. It has two different packages, so if you order from AliExpress and it come out looking different, don't freak out. So this is also Bao Hong. It's a lot bigger. This is 530 by 380 millimeters. So it's a little bit larger than 20 by 14 paper. Now again, very nice paper. I actually do this painting with this paper. And again, even though they consider this academic level, like a student grade paper, this is very, very good. Don't be fooled by that. And the price is actually quite a bit cheaper. So for the smaller size paper like this one, it's pretty close to 16 by 12, a little bit smaller, also 20 sheet. If you order from AliExpress, it costs about $25, $26, so quite a bit cheaper. So one of my videos said you can use cheap paper. This is the paper that I'm kind of referring to. So I'm pretty sure you can get even cheaper paper, but maybe it's not worth it. And for $26 US dollar, to get this paper, I think it's totally worth it. It just takes a little bit longer to get here because it's shipping from China. So that's it for my painting setup. I'm bad with math, so I'm just gonna say depends on how many materials you get. You're looking at about 400 to 500 US dollars. This is quite a bit of money, but you are getting some good quality and reliable materials that can last for quite a while. So you are not going to blame your unsuccessful painting on materials. This is also if you are starting with absolutely nothing. So if you already have some materials that you like, you don't have to replace them. My suggestion is to see which material you are not happy with and compare it to the one that I'm using and see if you want to give it a try. So I hope this video is helpful for you and get you started with watercolor this year. Now for the bonus, I want to share with you my 2020 New Year resolutions. The first thing is to get 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. This goal needs your help, so if you're new here and you like what you're seeing, consider subscribing. To be honest, the number of subscribers for me is really just an indication, knowing that my content is helpful for you and is reaching more people, as well as helping you to have more confidence when it comes to painting watercolor. To reach this goal, I'm going to create more content that has helpful tips and topics. So I won't be doing just painting videos. I'm also going to provide practical tips that you can apply for your paintings. The second thing is to become a better painter. I mean, this is a constant goal, but this year I'm actually going to attend a workshop by Andy Evenson this February. Andy is one of my favorite watercolor landscape artists. I love his simplicity and the luminance of his painting, and I am hoping to get a lot out of this workshop. I will be sharing what I learned from the workshop with you, and if possible, I will do a special episode where I interview him. The third goal is to start working out again. Last year, I have been so busy with work, updating course, painting, and moving to a new home, so I haven't really exercised and working out. I am going to start hitting the gym and try to be in better shape and just more healthy in general. Okay, I can list a ton more goals I want to achieve this year, but this is the biggest 3 I want to do. So hopefully by the end of 2020, I can do a video talk about the things I have accomplished. If you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe. Comment down below and let us know if you have any other materials and setup suggestions. Also, I would love to hear your New Year resolution as well. You can also visit my website at cafewatercolor.com to download my fast track watercolor PDF guide. I'm Eric from Cafe Watercolor, and I will see you again very soon.